Good morning. It is Thursday, May the 16th, and this is The Drill. And thank you very much. This is Ron, your host, one of only two truly conservative people in the United States of America today, because myself and President Trump are the only ones that make the presumption for the status quo. Speaking to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there.
Today's veteran tribute, U.S. Navy Chief Petty Officer, SEAL, David A. Feggio. He enlisted in the Navy in 2002 and went on to complete his basic training at NTC Great Lakes, Illinois. He then initially trained as a quartermaster at A School. In September 2003, he attended BUDS training at NAB Coronado, California, where he graduated with Class 245. After earning his SEAL Trident, CPO Feggio was assigned to SEAL Team 10, where he served until 2010. He then attended the grueling selection process known only as Green Team, where he was selected to serve with the Elite Naval Special Warfare Development Group, aka DevGRU, or SEAL Team 6, at Dam Neck, Virginia. He served with DevGRU Blue Squadron as a leading petty officer and breacher from 2010 onwards. He sadly died on October 5th, 2014, after a long battle with cancer. He leaves behind his wife and daughter, as well as his parents and various other family members, friends, and teammates. Rest easy, warrior. Always remembered, never forgotten. The pirates never give up the bones.
Okay, so that was from, again, Op Hawkeye on Instagram. It's op_Hawkeye. So a couple of things I want to get to Dennis Prager and Glenn Beck. There are two things for Glenn Beck and one for Dennis Prager. But I also want to get into right now what I was watching on television last night, and that was Criminal Minds. Now, a lot of conservatives might think, Criminal Minds is a good show to watch if you're a conservative, because it glorifies law enforcement. And as we know, the left has always told us that if we're going to be good conservatives, we have to be pro-law enforcement. So you would think that this is going to be then an excellent show to watch. If you watch the show, by the end of it, you should have some kind of doubts about this, about whether or not this is really a good show to watch after all. And it's a show that is very much very creepy. It's got a lot of creepy people in it, and it's about the FBI's. There's a special group of people in the FBI that do profiling, and they profile bad guys. So if there's a mystery afoot where there's people that have been murdered, they come in and they do a profile to help local authorities capture the bad guy and get them prosecuted and put them in prison. So in these, they always seem to be, there's always this extra. It was just really struck me as being really creepy. And I was trying to figure out something about it, the whole program, that just bothered me. And at first I was thinking, well, it's because more and more shows seem to be getting more and more bloodthirsty, right? That there's more blood, there's more gore, there's more all kinds of writing about intensity. They've notched up the intensity to the point where what is supposed to be a drama is really coming off like a horror show, like a horror story. And so I was thinking that was perhaps the key to understanding what it is that was going on with this particular program, and to making a judgment about it, that it's wrong to do so if it's going to be a drama and you're going to present yourself to the public as a drama, then you need to act like a drama, not act like a horror film. Okay, if you want to be a horror film, then go ahead and do it, but then market yourself that way. Don't defraud your customers. Have some integrity, have some credibility, and do what you say you're going to do. But I was watching last night, and it struck me because I've been on this thing where I've noticed over and over and over and over again the lack of value statements that are coming from the right. And it struck me when I was watching this show, Criminal Minds, last night, and I watched a couple of them back to back, that here you have a classic good guy, bad guy show. It's cop shows. Cop shows have been on forever, ever since there's been television. You've had Highway Patrol, and you've had Dragnet, and you've had Adam 12, etc. Those are the ones that I grew up on. And they were classic good guy, bad guy shows. That was the theme of it. You have the good guys, you have bad guys, everything's going along fine until the bad guys start screwing things up, and then the good guys come to the rescue and subdue the bad guys. And usually in these shows, you had value judgments. People were making judgments in terms of good guys and bad guys. This is a good person, this is a bad person. What I've noticed with Criminal Minds is the complete absence of any value statements by any of the characters in the show. Here they are dealing with not only bad people, but arguably the worst people on earth. And even if you can't get behind the idea of good and bad in terms of virtuous behavior, certainly the ugliest people. At the very least, you should be able to say that they're the ugliest people that you've ever seen and the ugliest things that have ever been done. But yet, the characters make no value statements or judgments, even when the bad guys are going after the agents. As they have many episodes in which that's the case. It starts to get almost like Batman, where they have these sort of arch nemeses that appear and reappear in various episodes, threatening the agents themselves. So, but that occurred to me. That's where the intensity comes from. That's where the show really gets its grittiness, its make your hair stand on edge quality. Is the fact that all of this takes place and everybody in the show, the characters, act as though this is routine, as though this is normal. And I would suppose that's the ultimate value judgment, is to say this is not normal. One of the first things that the left did in this country is get rid of the word normal from our vocabulary, drumming it out. People were very shamed for saying, that's describing behavior as not normal. One of the ways that they did that, of course, is by analyzing. Well, what do you mean by normal? What's normal? What's normal for you is not normal for somebody else, and they start going into a moral value relativism kind of a thing. Suggesting that everybody has their own, grows up differently, and so you can't judge them, and we got into that kind of thing. But ultimately, the way that value judgments have been drummed out of our society, it's not just here on this particular show, but if you listen to Rush Limbaugh, I was listening to him, a little clip of him this morning, and he was making a statement about something, and again, I was waiting for him to say that it was good or bad, and he said nothing. He just described the situation, and that was the end of the little clip. It was a teaser clip for his show. And over and over, Glenn Beck, no matter who it is, Alan or Prager, Mr. Prager, and all of these right-wing supposed conservatives that are supposed to be making value judgments and sound very ferocious on the radio, a lot of them, like especially Mr. Mark Levine, the little clips that I've heard from him where he's screaming and yelling, but he's impotent. He's a paper tiger because he doesn't make the value statements. He does not come out and say what is normal, what is not normal, what is right, what is wrong, what is good, what is bad, what is evil, what is beautiful, what is ugly. If you want to strike a blow against socialism, and by the way, it's going to have to come from you and I, if you're looking for the politicians to solve the problem, you're wasting your time and wasting everyone else's as well. You have to, if you want to defeat them, you have to make the value judgments. Okay, so when you're out talking to people and you're talking about something that has happened, you want to describe, if something happened that was great, you want to describe it as good, great, excellent, outstanding, Or if you're describing something that was bad, you want to use those terms. It was bad, it was horrible, it was terrible, it was awful. Now, the other person, especially if you're talking to a lefty, but almost no matter who you're talking to, because the left has so infiltrated our culture that pretty much everybody uses the same thing, handles the situation the same way, you're going to end up with analysis. Because that is the way they have drummed value statements out of our psyche, is by replacing it with psychoanalysis. And that's what very often you hear from the people on the right. They pat themselves on the back and they sound very self-congratulatory about how they figured out they psychoanalyzed a particular political candidate, or they've psychoanalyzed a particular pundit or columnist, and figured out, well, they're saying this because of this, that, and the other thing. The other day, classic example between the difference between true conservatism and reactionary is Rush Limbaugh. Rush Limbaugh the other day was talking about, played a clip where Hillary Clinton was talking about the potential or possibility of impeaching President Trump. And with what she did, she took a very reasonable and rational approach. She said, well, it's going to have to be something the House is going to have to deal with. They're going to have to do an investigation, and they're going to have to determine whether or not there are that the president has committed any high crimes or misdemeanors. If so, then they will go ahead and vote for impeachment. So that's a very logical and reasonable and correct position. But instead of Mr. Limbaugh saying, congratulations to Mrs. Clinton for getting it right for once, he instead starts to psychoanalyze her to figure out why it is she's saying this, because he senses that there's got to be some kind of an ulterior motive. It doesn't matter what her motives are. It doesn't matter what her psychology is. She's right or she's wrong, and you should be able to demonstrate it one way or another. So again, it's making the value statements, but check it yourself the next time if any of you are watching Criminal Minds. Check it yourself and see if any of the characters dare to make any value statements. They're good at describing behavior. This is what happened. They don't even describe the perpetrator as a perpetrator or as a bad guy. When I was growing up, it was good guys and bad guys. And they don't even describe him in those terms. He's described as an unsub. So it's everything about their handling of the situation is very clinical. They come in and analyze everything in a very dry and clinical way. At no point, especially at the end, there's no sense of celebration. There's no sense of completion. They've caught the person involved and the perpetrator, the bad guy. There's no sense that, yes, celebrate. Let's high five. We solved the case and we got the bad guy. Yes, he killed people, but he's going to be prosecuted and we're confident that he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison. High fives. He's a terrible guy. He belongs in prison and he should stay there for the rest of his life. You don't see that. So next time you're watching Criminal Minds, any show, any type of drama show, see if they're making value statements, that they're talking about what's good and bad and right and wrong, or are they involved in psychoanalysis, where they're psychoanalyzing the other people in their lives. And the same thing happened last night, as a matter of fact. There's a little show about a married couple that I guess they're going through some sort of problems. It's from what I've seen from the clips. It's a 10-minute show, and that's I guess 10 episodes, and they're all only 10 minutes long. And it's British, and they sit down basically they get together periodically once a week or whatever, sit down and have a cup of coffee and talk about their lives. But again, it was boring. It was so god-awful boring. It was terrible because they failed to make any judgments. They were very excellent describing their relationship, describing themselves, describing each other, but they were not very good at judging themselves and judging each other. And the problem with that, and the reason it's important, is because the reality is that all human beings have things, it's not only universals, we're all, well, okay, then we'll have to say, yeah, universals, but we have things in common. It's much easier to say it that way than use universals. Let's just say we have things in common. And it is the fact that we have things in common that allows us to have standards, allows us to judge ourselves and each other. That's what's important about making the value judgments. You're acknowledging reality. Making value judgments is not optional. It's mandatory, and as a matter of fact, it's inescapable. You may not do it out loud. You may not do it in the presence of other people, but you are doing it internally. You're internalizing it. So again, if you want to be somebody that's a warrior against socialism, the best way to do it is make value statements. And when people try to psychoanalyze, keep making the value statements. Just keep it up. Let me see. Oh, and Prager. I was listening to Prager the other day, and he almost got it right. I was listening to Prager because I'd never really listened to his show before, and he's another pundit on the radio that I think his first name is Alan, but I'm not sure. So that's why I'm calling him Prager. But he's another ersatz conservative, and I was listening to find out, is he really conservative, true conservative, or is he really a reactionary / idealist? And he falls into the second category. But what was really interesting is that he almost got it right. He almost acted as a true conservative. He asked a question of his audience, and the question was, why is it racist for somebody to question the nationality of President Obama? That when people questioned his nationality, those people were dismissed or slandered as being racists. He says, I don't understand that. I don't get it. Why? What is it about doing that, questioning his nationality, that's racist? Okay, so he gets a caller. And the caller is a lefty. And because basically I think he's baiting the lefties when he's making these, asking the question, but whatever. And the guy calls up, and the guy says to him, okay, so you're saying that people who question the president's nationality are not racist, right? And Mr. Prager fell for it. And he's, yes. And then the caller starts with the incredulous tone of voice. So, well, I can't believe you would say that. That's ridiculous. That kind of thing. And now Prager's on the defensive. He's trying to prove a negative, which is impossible, and he really ends up losing the argument. He ends up hanging up on the guy for the ridiculous notion that the guy used the L word and called him a liar. And he missed what was going on there. He missed the dynamic, Prager did, that the real, true conservative way to handle that situation was, first of all, you got to expect that when the left calls you up, they're not going to make statements. They're not going to answer your questions because they know that's weak. Okay, answering questions is weak. Asking questions is strong, is powerful. So they're going to approach it from a power position. So they're going to try to ask a question. And this guy did a little pivot where he said, okay, so you're saying, to make it sound as though he is answering the question, and then in the end, it ends up being another question. He doesn't answer it at all. So if he comes and he calls, and if I have a show and he's calling me and he says, okay, so you're saying that people who aren't, I would immediately aren't, there's people who are questioning the president's nationality aren't racist, right? I would say, is that what I'm saying? Okay, we got to put it right back on him, because he needs to prove it. I'm not going to take his word for it. If I indeed did say that, then he needs to say so. come out and say, how do you figure this? Are you paraphrasing? Is this a matter of logic? Because obviously, that's not what I said. I asked a question. And that's another way to handle it. There'd be an excellent way to do it is say, when he says, well, so what you're saying is, no, I didn't say anything. I asked a question. Do you have an answer to the question? Yes or no? You've got to be firm on this particular point of view, because the left is always going to try and box you in, put you in the position of trying to prove a negative. And if you allow yourself to get baited into doing that, you lose, because it is impossible to prove a negative. Don't let yourself get caught in that position. If you're asking a question and you need an answer, listen. Are they providing an answer, or are they providing a rebuttal question? If they're providing a rebuttal question, you have to be firm, say, and again, you might get this from your brothers, sisters, co-workers, the people that, the socialists that you meet in your everyday life. So be firm and don't allow them to question you. Don't allow them, in essence, to take control of the conversation. If they have an answer, that's fine. If they don't, hey, that's good too. Why don't you think about it and come back to me when you've got an answer. And a couple for Beck. Glenn Beck had, in one particular episode, he was talking about, because he thinks that being conservative, again, is where you stand on the issues, and one of the issues is free trade. And where do you stand on free trade? And if you're pro-free trade, you're a conservative. If you're not, then you are something else. You're a socialist or whatever. But to be a good, rock-solid conservative, you have to be pro-free trade. Well, I've debunked that already, but I'll do it again. There is no free trade. There's never been any free trade. There'll never be any free trade as long as we have governments, plural. The only way we'll ever have free trade is if we have one world government. The only place we have free trade is in the United States, for instance, between the states, between California and Nevada, between Arizona and Idaho. They have free trade. There's no tariffs between, California doesn't have any tariffs from products from Georgia. Okay, there's no tariffs in the United States. So if Georgia wants to do business with California, and California and Georgia are going to trade back and forth, there you go. No tariffs, free trade. Because there's the one federal government that runs the United States. So if there's any problems or issues or whatnot, they can always go to that government. But as long as we have separate governments around the world, every government is going to do what they think and believe is best for their people, their taxpayers, their voters, or in some cases, their subjects. So that's just the way it is. So there's not going to be any free trade. But so he comes out and says that because Donald Trump is having this trade war with China, and remember that the whole purpose of having this trade war is not because Donald Trump loves trade wars. He's got nothing better to do. He's bored, so he's going to pick a fight with China. He's doing it to renegotiate, create a platform to renegotiate the terms of our trade agreement. That the previous trade agreements were inadequate and poorly written and put us at a disadvantage. And Donald Trump wants to set things up so that the United States is better off. So, but anyways, Mr. Beck says, well, I wish Donald Trump, it's so terrible and horrible and awful. And he says that Donald Trump will lose the farm vote. And at first it sounds very intelligent. It sounds very cogent, But a couple of problems. Number one is that he's making a prediction instead of making a value statement. And that's another way that the left has discouraged us from making value statements, is psychoanalysis, and on the other hand is by making predictions. The left will always loves, what do you predict? What do you predict is going to happen? You hear it on talk shows on the television all the time, like the Sunday talk shows. CBS, ABC, they all have their Sunday morning talk shows where they invite the rich and powerful to come in and be interviewed, and they inevitably ask for predictions. What do you predict? What do you predict? The McLaughlin Group, I don't know if that's still available. It used to be on PBS, and they would have a round table of various pundits, people that were writers, usually writers, columnists, and they were always asking for predictions. What do you predict? What do you predict? What do you predict? The right answer for that is prediction doesn't matter. What matters is values. And what should happen here is, because predictions you can't back up. It's basically, most of the time it's a flip of the coin anyways. But values you can. This should happen. This is why it should happen. So Mr. Beck, if he wanted to be rhetorically effective, should have said that, assuming that he believes that the right way to go is to have free trade, then he should have said that Trump should lose the farm vote. And this is why Trump should lose the farm vote. Okay, so as it turns out, President Trump is very much aware of the fact that the farmers are the ones to get hurt the most in a trade war with China, and he has come out and said that his administration will provide aid to farmers to get them through this difficulty. So, but again, make the value statement. Don't make predictions. Don't psychoanalyze. Make the value statements. And last one was Beck was talking about neo-Nazis and referred to them as alt-right. That is what the alt-right is, a term that was created by the left. And too many people on the right use that term and shouldn't. Neo-Nazis are not alt-right. The white supremacists are not alt-right. They're both left. They should be referred to by conservatives as alt-left or just left. Because, and we know for a fact as a matter of reality that these groups are left, because the left is idealistic. That's the essence of being a left, is idealism. We also know that neo-Nazis and white supremacists of other stripes are also idealists. They're looking for the ideal society also, but they're looking for the ideal racial society. For them, the ideal society is a society with only white people. Okay? So they're idealistic, the left is idealistic, therefore they belong on the left. Because the right, the conservatives, are realistic. We're not looking for an ideal society. We change when there's an obvious case for change. And other than that, we maintain the status quo. And that brings me to the conclusion of another episode of The Drill. And until next time, thank you for listening and have a great day.